All right, lastly, our last type of good. Last corner here, public goods. Things that are both non-rival in consumption and non-excludable. So, me using it does not mean there's less left over for you, and also nobody can stop me from using it. These are called public goods. Lots of examples of these, things like national defense, fireworks shows. I've used both those examples already. Street lights, lighthouses, roads that aren't toll roads or crowded. These are all public goods. So these goods have a fundamental tension, sort of like the problem that these other two types of goods have that are not private, right? The real problem is that these are super valuable things to have, but again, who's going to provide them, right? We want to have them because they are nice to have. They provide a lot of benefits to everybody. However, you can't really charge for them because they are non-excludable, right? Like imagine going to somebody's house and saying, hey, do you want to buy the military this year? Right? Are you going to pay your military bill? Because if you don't pay your military bill, we're going to let the Canadians invade specifically your house. You can't do that. Like, that doesn't work. And so if you were trying to provide that service in a market, it just wouldn't work because nobody would be willing to pay for it. You realize, whether I pay for this or not has no bearing on whether it gets provided to. Right? If I skip out on my military bill this year, either they're going to do it anyway. I'm not going to be protected anyway, even though I didn't pay, which is good for me because I didn't pay. Or a lot of people are not going to pay for it. It's going to all fall apart. And it doesn't matter whether I pay or not because it's not going to happen. I'm going to have to pay for nothing. So it's never really in my incentive to actually pay for the thing. Which means that, again, if it was being provided in a market, there'd be no incentive to provide the thing. So nobody wants to be stuck with the bill. Right? So we'd all rather do what's called free ride, which is that thing that I just said, which is not contributing in the hopes that other people will contribute in your stead. If you've ever been on a group project, you know exactly how this works. So free riding happens when you decide not to do any of the work, increasing the amount of the good, which has all these positive benefits, and instead just enjoy the externality benefits, right? You hope that other people will provide the externality good for you. And you can sort of think of these public goods as being things that are just 100% externality, right? The entire value of these goods is not so much for the people who pay for them as it is for everybody else. So you're hoping that you're just going to get all those nice positive externalities without having to actually buy any of the thing yourself, which would be inefficient. So this is going to happen in all sorts of cooperative situations, including government provision, all sorts of stuff, group project to share or create, etc. So you can imagine why this might make it very difficult to provide these goods in a competitive market and why we would expect to be inefficiently low production, right? Nobody would dare to embark on trying to provide these public goods knowing that they're never going to get paid for it, right? You're never going to make money on this stuff because nobody ever has to pay you. And why would they pay you? So you might know that people want it. You might know that it would make the world better off, and yet you don't want to be stuck with the bill. You hope that somebody else will produce it instead. So, same question as before. How can we actually provide this stuff if a general, regular old market is not going to do it for us? So the fundamental problem we have is that it's hard to get anyone to agree to pay, even though the benefits totally outweigh the costs. One way that you can solve this is just to have the government provide the thing for you, right? Because the government is really the only one who can force people to pay for it through taxes, right? I can't force you to pay your military bill, but I can force you to pay your taxes, and then I can use that on funding the military or whatever, or the fire department, or the school, or whatever it is, right? So one approach is government provision. The government can force you to pay for the stuff through taxes, which allows them to fund public goods, even if those public goods would not be individually profitable. Another kind of way you could do it is imagine like centralized provision, right? So imagine there's some rich person out there who individually will get enough benefit from this, or at least enough benefit from people knowing that they paid for it and liking them, that they're going to be willing to provide it on their own. Could happen. You probably don't want to run on hopes of that happening all the time, but it could happen. You also have things like company buying it for their employees, right? Let's say you have a public good. You might not provide it for everybody, but you provide it for your employees, right? So, you have a nice little restroom, like not a bathroom, but like a room to rest in your office building. It's a nice public good. Anybody can go in, but only for your employees. Another way that this is often provided, especially in more in recent years, is that you tie a public good to a good that you can charge for. Right? We see a lot of this. So for example, Google search is basically a public good. It's non-excludable, right? Nobody's stopping you from using Google. You don't have to pay for it. And also it is non-rival. Me doing a Google search does not mean there's less search left over for you. So why is it being provided if they can't possibly make any money on it? And in fact, they don't. They make pretty much no money on Google search, with some exceptions about like licensing out the software and things like that. But what they did is they tied it to something that does make money, which is ads, right? So they're providing public good because they can tie it to a non-public good, right? So providing public good on its own, you got to really do government provision, or like some central figure has to sort of do it because nobody's going to make it in a market. Or you can tie it to something that does make money, to the private good, right? So that's their incentive for providing the public good, is because the private good that gets linked to it is worth it. You can't also, just on a small scale, just hope people will pay for it anyway, right? Hard to do on like a big scale for something like, the municipal water supply as a public good. But if you're talking about like the public goods of like, a creator on YouTube, right? They don't need millions and millions of dollars. So they can just ask people to pay for the thing, right? It's really not in their individual interest to pay for it, but there's enough people out there who will probably pay for it anyway, even if it's not really in their individual interest, that you can fund the thing. So on a small scale, you can just ask people to do out the goodness of their hearts, pay for it, even though it would be, they could just free ride. Or you can do all these other things. Yeah.
How can you consider that through donations?
Yeah. Yeah. So donations as a way of funding public goods, probably not great on a grand scale, but on a small scale it can work. And we see it work all the time. That's what Patreon is. So to recap, we got 4 kinds of goods. We have private goods, which are no problem. Things that are excludable but not rivalrous, they are artificially scarce, which we're either going to underproduce or which we are going to underproduce. We can get a bit closer to efficiency by having some sort of club system. Things that are non-rival but excludable, or sorry, non-excludable but rival, those are commons goods. Everyone wants to take them right away where they run out. You got to have some way of stopping people from taking them all right away, which either means giving it to somebody or having some sort of regulation that stops you from taking it away. Then you have goods that are non-rivalrous and non-excludable, public goods, which are going to be underproduced because you just can't get paid for doing it. So either you got to have somebody who isn't necessarily trying to maximize profit, or who can force you to pay, like the government, or some benevolent benefactor, or you can tie it to something else that does make money, like Google does with Google search, or if it's on a small scale, you can just hope that enough people are willing to not free ride.